Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Jump On Air. We're so happy you've chosen to spend a little of your Wednesday with us as we explore statistics, science, data, and of course, Jump. My name is Julian Paris. I am the Learning Strategy Manager here at Jump Software. And as always, I get the great privilege to be your host for Jump On Air. And it's going to be a really great show today. We have some fabulous speakers here who are going to share their knowledge with us and share their stories with us. I'll be referring to a schedule throughout the day in just a second. It looks like my screen has chosen the wrong screen to share, but I will be sharing that schedule with you in just a moment. And throughout the day, you can always reconnect to our stream just by visiting jump.com/JOA. That'll connect you, jump.com/jumponair. That'll connect you right back to the live stream where you can take us with you on your phone. You can take us up to the kitchen, take us on a run, whatever you want. Jump.com/jumponair. We hope after the show that you'll come and join us at the community at community.jump.com/jumponair. That community space is where you'll be able to interact with our guests. You'll be able to watch any of the past episodes. That's where you'll be able to do any of those things you want at community.jump.com/jumponair. While I work out those technical difficulties, why don't we instead go and do a tip of the day where Mary and Pete tell us a jump tip that will solve a real life problem. Here are Mary and Pete, and we'll come back and we'll try to do the announcements after that. Pete and Mary, why don't you kick it off for us?
So, Pete, what are you going to do with your 3-day weekend?
You know, Mary, that's a great question. I usually do this Memorial Day fishing trip with my college buddies. That got put on hold because flying to Oregon's not really happening right now. How about you? You got any big plans?
Well, you know I fly fish, so I'm going to try and do some fishing. They finally opened the beaches up. Social distancing, so I got my little jump bandana.
Nice.
And contain my air.
Yeah, looks good.
And
let's hope those fish don't keep their social distance, huh?
I hope not. At least swim by me. So anyhow, yeah.
Yeah, know that they're there.
And plus my video camera's getting a little fatigued with me, so.
Yeah, it needs a break. All right. I hear you have something cool to show me, Mary. Let's take a look at this very exciting add-in you told me about.
Oh, you know I love color, right?
Yeah. I do. Christmas colors.
Oh, I love Christmas colors. So I discovered, was out cruising the user community, and this is, user community, and this is add-ins where, we have discussions and blog posts, but I was in add-ins, and I love things with color, right?
Yes.
So anyhow, I found this add-in. It's called the Row Assistant, and it was put together by Nick Holmes in the tech support group, and I sent him kudos because I was really happy.
Yeah.
But it allows you to color cells and do row states and create a legend. So, hey, you ready? Let me show you.
Yeah, let me see this.
All right, let me minimize that. So, if you look here, some of you may not have this add-in option. And
how do you get that?
You get that by you go to File Open, and if you have an add-ins directory, or downloads, or just select an add-in. We'll say open, and it says reinstall it. Yes. And it's going to go through and install the add-in. And then,
so once that's installed, that menu will get added? Is that how that works?
All you need is one add-in to activate the menu. And if you look here, I have many add-ins because
you've got more than one, yeah.
I got many. And so I'm going to scroll down the bottom. There's the one I just added. But here's this row color, and they have little toolbars, little tool tips.
Oh, that's cool.
So
you even put a little icon in there. Okay.
Yeah. So let me, so this is the interface, and I'm going to select type and sporty, and I want sporty to be red, and I'm going to set the row state because I want the marker.
Yeah.
I'm going to apply, and if you look over here behind, here's my data table, and it has that row state.
Super cool.
Yep. And let's do compact. Let's just make them dog yellow. And so you can see behind it's changing. But, with data filters, which we talked about one of our tips and tricks, we use the local data filter, and this is the table data filter that operates on the table. That's at the main menu level. But, I love and ors, but let's do an and I want horsepower because I like speed. So I like grabbing this. Let's bring this up here. And since it's an I think I'll do sporty and horsepower, and I'm going to make that green. Yeah.
Because that's the car you really want.
that's the type and speed. Yep. So I'm going to apply it. And what's neat is you can see my stoplight colors.
Yeah.
If you go down the bottom here, you have a legend, right? And you can delete these, mark for deletion if you want. You can reset the legend or remove it. But you can save this legend to data table.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that.
All right.
And let me just move it aside. And as always, here it is. Here's my second legend that I put up. And you actually have it as part of your data table.
That's nice. I like the color too. It really makes it pop.
Oh, it does. And so you go to Graph Builder and you just bring in type. You see it's got your colors.
Oh, yeah.
Power. And there you go.
Perfect. That's awesome. So again, where do I find that? How do I get there again? Is that community.jump.com?
So yeah, you go to communityjump.com and you can get that from, let me go to my home window real quick and under help. And if you go under jump on the web, you get jump user community.
That's the quickest. You don't need to remember a URL at all.
And then you go to
nice.
add-ins.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was row.
Color assistant right there at the top one.
Oh, yep. And there you have it.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Nick Holmes, for developing this. I think it's really useful. And back to you, Julian.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pete and Mary, for bailing me out while I fix all my screens. So quickly, just so now we can get through a couple quick announcements before the show starts. Next week, next Thursday, in fact, there is a fantastic Statistically Speaking that I don't want you to miss. It's going to be on demystifying machine learning and artificial intelligence. Dick DeVoe will be the keynote, and we have a great panel with Julie O'Neill and Russ Wolfinger, so you'll absolutely want to join us for that, Statistically Speaking. Jump.com/StatSpeaking is a URL where you can sign up for that Stat Speaking event, so make sure you visit that for next Thursday. I mentioned last week that this Friday is our last show. Season 1 of Jump On Air is coming to an end. So I wanted to mention that the Abbey is today. If you don't know what the Abbey is, my favorite purveyor of miscellaneous knowledge, Jeff Perkinson, let me know that the Abbey is the second to last shot in a screening or a movie. The last is actually the martini shot because the next shot is out of a glass. The Abbey actually comes from Abby Singer, who was a pretty famous assistant director who would always tell the crew that the Abbey was happening, or he would just say the second to last shot is going to happen. And this let the crew prepare to move to the next scene. It would actually end up saving quite a bit of time during the shooting. So this made me think about the crew that works on this show, because there's a lot of people involved who you haven't gotten to see. There's certainly people who have been on the show and they've been integral into actually making Jump On Air happen. But there's a great number of people who you've actually never met because they haven't been on the show. And so I just want to give a call out to Jeff Perkinson, John Weiss, Ryan DeWitt, Ryan Gilmore, Alexa Balthazar, Dinah Levy, and Millie, who you have seen on the show, but who's also been integral in our programming. Manasa Thiagarajan, John Mosier, John Jones, Aaron Kennedy, Ryan Clare, Larry LaRusso, Roger Alford, Artie Meidel, Tina Cui, and Landra Cunningham. These people have really made this show happen, and without them, there really wouldn't be a Jump On Air. So I want to make sure that we got to show them to at least once before our first season ended. And there's a great number of people who, even beyond those people directly involved in the show, who have done a great service to making this show happen. All the people at Jump who've been on the shows, who have contributed show ideas, who've really come up with a lot of the segment episode ideas. And so everyone here at Jump, I just want to make sure to thank you for all the work you've done to make Jump on Air possible. All right. So with that, let's get to the actual show. The tip of the day, Pete and Mary already saved me earlier, so we've already seen that. So now let's move on to one of our featured programs where we have Ann Milley here with Rob Carver to talk about his books.
So, Rob, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today and talk about your books and your latest white paper.
Thank you, Ann. It's a treat.
So before we jump into talking about your publications, how did you learn about Jump?
Well, it was Kurt Heinrichs of the Jump academic team. Some of you may know Kurt. He and I had worked together, it's got to be 20 years ago now, on some precursor books to practical data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And he was an editor in his former life. And I was at a joint stats meeting or maybe a decision sciences conference. And Kurt had just started with Jump and he was all excited about this software. And he showed it to me and it was nice, but I was already pretty heavily invested in teaching with other, a not to be named software product. And this must have been Jump 5 or 6. But Kurt persisted, and maybe a year later we sat down and he gave me a full demo and I was blown away.
Oh, what a great story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kurt's persistent.
Thank you, Kurt.
Good. Well, your book, Practical Data Analysis with Jump, is now in its 3rd edition. What inspired you to write that?
Well, for that we go back to those earlier books. And the statistics education reform movement with people like John Garfield and the late terrific George Cobb, Roxy Peck, Robin Locke, who are in the Jump universe, and a lot of other folks, was very influential in these early days of my teaching. And it always made sense to me to have students actively engaged doing analysis rather than memorizing formulas and performing hand calculations, to do analysis the way people actually do statistics. And I was a little disappointed. The textbooks at that time were beginning to incorporate software, but it was always, here's our standard chapter, and as an afterthought, here's how you do this in product X. And so I began writing exercises just for my students with the goal of having them perform analysis with real data sets that I hoped would give them insight into the why and how of the techniques, and also a little feel for what is it that statisticians do. So I wrote those earlier books, and Kurt was the editor. He made the transition to Jump, and he said, SAS has this arm called SAS Press, and there's a gap in it. We really need a book for Jump that's like those other books of yours. And I'm thinking this was around 2008, 9. I had some other things going on in my life, so it took a little while to get it together, but we produced the book. And one of the things that I've always admired about Jump is that with other software, it often felt to me like, well, okay, we're learning statistics, and now we have to get over all kinds of obstacles to make these other packages part of the course. With Jump, it seemed to me that Jump was an ideal entree to statistical thinking, statistical practice. For most of my career, I taught undergraduate business students. And it seemed to me that they were going to be consumers rather than producers, but to be an informed, intelligent consumer and somebody who can distinguish between legitimate analysis, good analysis, and weaker. You have to do it. And it felt to me that rather than erecting obstacles, JMP paves the way. It, in its structure, in its design, it emphasizes the very same things I wanted to teach about. And it reinforces, just by its design and nature, a lot of the important ideas that I wanted to emphasize. Things like visual inspection of the data. Never do an analysis without a picture. Well, in JMP, that's not even an option, right? And matching your method to your analytical goal, the type of data. And I think maybe the one disagreement Kurt and I had in all of this was I wanted to call the book Understanding Statistics with JMP. And Kurt pushed back and said, we wanted to make it clear that this book uses data. This is not theoretical statistics. This is data-based analysis, and that people would be actively doing analysis. So I lost that battle, but I think I won in the end because it's a good title.
Indeed it is. And we're so glad you did write the book. So you know that SAS during the month of April provided free copies of ebooks, and your book, Practical Data Analysis with JMP, was the most popular. So thank you for letting us provide your books for free during that month. And then, so now I'm going to ask you, why do you think the book is so popular?
Well, first of all, I had no idea that I knew it was being offered for free. I was happy to be part of that. I had no idea that it was so highly requested, so thank you for sharing that news. And the short, honest answer is I really don't know. But I think a few features of the book may have had something to do with it. One, it's written in very plain language. It's not highly theoretical or mathematical. And ironically, as I said, I wrote this with my students in mind. You know, when you write, you want to be thinking about your audience. And so I pictured my students who were forced into this required course. And much to my surprise, the book became popular not only with other universities, but in industrial and commercial and governmental among clients of JMP. And I think, though that my audience was college students, industrial, commercial, governmental users, they need to do analysis in their work. They are experts in their domains, not necessarily in analysis. Some of them are, but not everybody is. And whatever training they had, one of my influential college professors used to say, if you don't use this stuff daily, it evaporates. And so even if you've been trained, it's kind of nice to have an accessible reference source. And so I'm thinking that a practically oriented undergraduate treatment might be part of it. And the only other thought I have is that there's a real breadth of coverage of topics and of examples. So whether the domain area is public health or manufacturing or marketing, there's some material for that audience or those audiences. And it, everything from design of experiments to elementary descriptives to multivariate analyses is in there. Not at a very deep level, but it's in there. And so I think it's accessible and attractive to lots of readers. But I'd love to hear from the JMP community, what do people like about the book?
Oh, well, we can work on arranging that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're enabling so many more people than you originally envisioned to be more effective with data. So thank you. And we also want to thank you for being inspired to write another book, Preparing Data for Analysis with JMP. How did the idea to write a whole book on data preparation come to you?
I'd love to take credit for that. But one day I got a call from someone I didn't know named Sean Roberts, who is now the editor-in-chief at SAS Press. And the editorial team was reviewing the JMP offerings and found another gap, which was, gee, we don't have a good book about data preparation. I didn't know Sean. This was a kind of a bolt out of the blue. And my initial reaction was, an entire book about data preparation? That's like, it's not quite watching paint dry, but I don't know. But around that time, I was teaching some graduate courses in analytics as well. And in developing examples for the students, I was doing a lot of data preparation to come up with data sets that I thought would be appropriate for class use. And it occurred to me that this is at a time when analytics is starting to look like an attractive career path. That wasn't always the case, but suddenly people wanted to learn about this and thinking they're going to make a life from it. And I realized that kind of in the truth in advertising theme, that the reality of doing data analysis is you are going to be wrangling data. You're going to be cleaning it. You're going to be dealing with missing values, with making judgments about outliers and all sorts of things, joining multiple sources together. And so I began giving assignments that called upon students to figure out some data wrangling. And of course, they hated that. It was tedious, they weren't trained, it was laborious, and they really struggled. And I thought, well, on the one hand, why would I think people could just figure this out? And on the other hand, if you're thinking about a career in data analytics, you need to learn how to wrangle data, because you're going to be spending, 60, 70, 80% of your time. Right. That's what you do.
Right.
So then all of a sudden the book sounded like a good idea, and we went ahead and we did it. And of course, JMP makes that easy.
Well, again, thank you for that. And great that you're always thinking of your students. So I think that really comes through. And on that, what did you enjoy most about teaching?
Oh, gosh. I think, in a word, students. I enjoyed the relationships. I enjoyed introducing them to this world that we live in. And I fully retired about a year ago. And on the one hand, I'm relieved that I'm not having to deal with the logistics that everybody else is dealing with right now. But I think that what we're seeing around COVID, around the varying national and state level responses, the desperate need for data, and introducing students to the value of data and analysis it doesn't get much more real than what we're going through now. And, the other thing, for other folks who have taught statistics, students arrive with very low expectations. So it's not too hard to exceed them. And so when you see a little flash of light that somebody gets it or sees the value in it, that's fun. It's exciting.
Nice story. Well, how did you decide to adopt JMP in your teaching?
Well, kind of picking up on what I was talking about earlier, I think one of the distinctions of JMP is that it really does pave the way. It reinforces important ideas. We know that any tool, language, package that you use will reduce a person's computational burden. They don't have to do those things by hand. You can use large data sets. You can use real data. But teaching 19-year-olds how to think statistically and to write code is a tall order. jump, that's just not an issue. And, I'm guessing that most folks watching right now are jump users or have some exposure to it. You can be doing analysis within 10 minutes after you meet jump for the first time, whether it's graph builder or analyze distribution. And then as your skills and needs increase and develop, the next tool you need is there. The next wrinkle or option is provided. And so it seemed to me to be extensible. And SAS and JMP have always been extraordinarily generous to the university community. And so that makes a difference too.
Very good. Yes, and to what you were saying earlier about removing obstacles, it hopefully helps you focus more on conveying the concepts to the students so that they can appreciate the whole gestalt of it.
Absolutely. And the software becomes a partner in that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So next I want to ask you, as someone on the editorial board of the Journal of Statistics Education, what trends do you see that will positively influence statistical education?
Well, one of them, while we're talking technology, is genuine integration of technology in learning and teaching. It's not an advanced skill set that comes later. There's economic and demographic factors here. Not everyone can afford all sorts of technology, but every year prices fall, availability rises. I think for a long while now, we've been redefining the boundaries of what introductory statistics education is about. And so now we're placing techniques within the context of a cycle of analysis that happens in some sort of an organizational context, so that it isn't a matter of, here's a t-test, you should learn a t-test because it's important and because it's the 7th week of the course, but rather here's a use, here's a need. Again, if we're thinking about COVID, ideas like, well, what data would you need to have to answer the life and death questions that the whole world is confronting right now? That provides a motivation in a context that hasn't traditionally been there. Another trend, and I mean, there's a bunch of them, but I'll stop here. The global exchange of data, of analyses, the recognition of the importance of data sharing, of reproducible analysis, and also of ethical concerns, ethical considerations. A lot of the data that's gathered, let's say from social media, people provide that data, maybe not fully cognizant of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that places a burden, an ethical burden, on the analysts.
So many interesting areas to explore. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I couldn't help but also notice, and now I want to ask you, do you think your enthusiasm for statistics is part of what led to your teaching awards?
Oh, sure. Not sure what else to say about that, but yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to have a job that I loved, and I think that comes through.
Good. Well, thank you, because there are spillover benefits in so many ways for these students. Our colleague Mia Stevens, she tells me that you contributed heavily to the decision-making with data module in the STIPS course, the Statistical Thinking for Industrial Problem Solving. And are you surprised at how popular this course has become?
I'm not really surprised. Mia Stevens had a vision for this course from the outset that really seems to fill a sizable market need. There's lots of online instruction available on the web. Not all of it's free. STIPS is free. It's comprehensive. It's accessible. people can pick and choose what portions of the course they want to pursue. Also, Mia wisely assembled a large, diverse team advising on the design of the course, the execution. Julian Paris was
Mhm.
worked with the JMP academic community to help figure out what there needs to be. Industry voices were heard in that, and so kind of like in data preparation, before the first module was drafted, there were pretty clear ideas about what the market wanted. And I think that was a key to success. And then Mia, who is as persuasive and energetic as Kurt, and she brought her own intelligence and energy to the project. So if anybody watching hasn't navigated over to STIPS, take a look. It's really fantastic. It's fun, and I think kudos to JMP for making this available to the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you for contributing to it, Rob. And I will say that I have really enjoyed taking those courses, and I also appreciate you plugging them because I think they are well worth checking out.
So I didn't get 100% on all the quizzes, Anne, did you?
No, let's not talk about that.
Okay, that's okay. We'll
Well,
go
I
on to
did
something
after I
else.
tried a few times, but okay. So you gave a keynote on ethical questions about big data analytics a few years ago, and it sounds fascinating. Can you give us just a few of the highlights from that?
Yeah, this was excuse me. This was as part of a symposium run 4 years ago by the RAB School of Graduate and Professional Studies at Brandeis University here in Massachusetts. And as a university, Brandeis has had, since its founding, a deep commitment to social justice. Justice Louis Brandeis was well known for promoting the concept of a right to privacy for U.S. citizens. And so this symposium kind of tied together the Brandesian values with the growing interest in analytics. And I talked about a number of areas, but I'll mention 3 of them. One is, as statisticians, we're always thinking about sources and risks of error in a study, whether it's or the unavoidable, irreducible sampling error or measurement errors. So it's always in our minds. When models get built, the analyst may realize that there's this zone of uncertainty, this kind of every estimate is in this bubble of uncertainty. But in the popular mind, that's not always so clear. And as we start seeing more and more artificial intelligence, which makes predictions that lead to action, that concern for error kind of gets lost, or sometimes can get lost. And so thinking about not only what are the practical consequences of error, but what are the ethical consequences, that's something that ought to be part of the process of analysis. So, and that kind of leads me to my second point, that not only does the degree of error in your model have implications, but those implications, the magnitude of them, the reach of them, is going to vary by domain. So if we think about a retail classification model, it might essentially say, this person who's visiting my website right now looks a lot like prior customers who bought X. So let's show this visitor a promotion for X. And so, you visit a website, we've all done this. Sometimes, oh my gosh, that ad is like talking to me. And frequently, that ad is just not resonating. I skip it. no big deal. They spent some processing time. They spent some pixels on an ad, and no great consequence. You could have a very similar model in a university setting that says, this particular student, Carver, he matches closely with prior students who earned low grades. So maybe he needs an intervention, or maybe someone should be keeping an eye on the student. Not so different from showing me an ad for a product I don't want. Maybe that's good, maybe it's benign, or maybe it's an invasion of privacy. Maybe tagging a student as at risk becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or at the extreme, a law enforcement agency has a classification model that says this person, Ann Millie, matches very closely on some key criteria with prior citizens who committed crimes. So what do we do with Ann? Do we patrol her? Do we monitor her? Do we preemptively arrest her? What are the consequences and what happens when there's error? So that was one big area. The third area had to do with informed consent. And for anybody who works with human subjects, whether it's medical or psychological, informed consent is a bedrock ethical principle. In recent years in the data mining AI world, some of the most fascinating and clever modeling approaches combine data from different places. Maybe from publicly available federal sources, census, maybe from web traffic, maybe from surveys that people fill out. And at each stage, the provider of the data, the individual citizen who gives up the data, probably provided some sort of consent. Whether it was fully informed, whether they fully understood, fine. But you take a survey or you join a customer loyalty program, and now all of your transactions are kept by the retailer, and you understand they might send me offers, they might analyze what I've done. But now we move into an area where data gets combined from countless other consumers. Maybe you're not even part of the customer loyalty program, but because there are a lot of people who are, the retailer begins to get ideas about what products sell to your demographic. And so there's a model that leads to some decisions. Again, many of them are probably benign. But if you ask, what does it mean to consent to a use that hasn't been conceived yet, that requires statistical methods that you don't understand? What happens to informed consent? How do you ensure informed consent? So, again, in the COVID world, if we're using GPS data as part of a public policy that traces COVID contacts, which might be a very good thing, but when I turned on my phone, I don't think I understood that I was consenting to that.
Right.
So on and on it goes, but lots of interesting questions.
Yeah, so many unanticipated uses of the data that could go so many different directions. So thank you for helping us contemplate that.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Well, and I want to tell our viewers that I'm super excited about this white paper that you've written. Thank you for writing, preparing data for, well, what are we calling it? Take the struggle out of data wrangling with JMP. And would you say it's a tiny little teaser to your book on preparing data for analysis?
Well, you bet it is. The white paper draws heavily on the book, but it covers some other areas that I didn't go into so much in the book, and I think it stands alone. But it gives a kind of 30,000-foot overview of the area of data wrangling.
Good. Well,
And JMP is rich in techniques and things that make this drudgery much less painful.
yes, we keep trying to remove more obstacles. Well, thank you for writing that for us. And our viewers can download a copy at jump.com/data wrangling. So hot off the press, we're super excited. You can be among the first ones to take a look at it. So I'm sorry we're out of time, Rob, because there's so many other things we could discuss, but thank you so much for joining us for this.
This has been a pleasure, Anne. Thank you. It's good to see you.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye. Back to you, Julian.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you so much, Anne. We'll make sure to put links to all of Rob's books as well as that new white paper at our community page, community.jump.com/jumponair. In our next segment, we have Phil K. back to finish off his series, Why DOE, this time talking about parsimony and accelerating innovation.
Hey everybody, so thanks for joining me for the last of this segment on why design of experiments. And today we've got a couple of topics to finish up on. So this is the last two of my posts in the series of blog posts that I wrote, and they're on parsimony. I'm going to be explaining what we mean by parsimony. And just to conclude, how design of experiments enables us to accelerate innovation. Again, today what we'll cover is, first of all, a reminder of why I wrote this blog series, what we're trying to achieve with this. We'll cover all the things that we've talked about in previous segments. There's quite a lot to cover there. We've really got through quite a lot of terminology and the values of design of experiments. Then I'm going to talk about something a bit strange. Might sound like a strange thing to be talking about when we're talking about experiments. What we're going to try and do is optimize a meeting. So we're going to optimize the participants in a meeting using something called forward stepwise selection. And we're using that as an analogy for how we build the most useful models from our data. I'm going to explain what I mean by parsimony. This is one of the terms you might come across when you look into design of experiments, data analytics, statistical modeling more generally. And it's one of the attributes of a useful model for solving real-world problems in science and engineering, or whatever your discipline might be. Now, we've covered a lot already in this series of blog posts and these accompanying JMP On Air segments. There was a lot that we couldn't cover though, so I want to make sure that you're aware of how much more there is to learn and how much more there is to explore. So we'll touch on some of the most important things that we haven't talked about and where you can find articles and resources to learn more about those. Because it's the last of these, I've got a bit of an end of term, last day of term kind of feel, and I wanted to include some of the quotes that I like and that I think are useful when we're talking about design of experiments. And this is one that I just picked up a book the other day. I've been reading about the discovery and development of penicillin, funnily enough, because I think there's some interesting parallels to the kind of science problems that JMP helps to solve. And this was, I haven't read the book yet, but this was right at the front of that book, a quote from a guy who was part of the Royal Society of London. And what he said was, the more intelligent the question you ask of Mother Nature, the more intelligent will be her reply. And I like that because I quite often talk about design of experiments as being a smart experimentation strategy. So I think it's the most intelligent way to ask questions about your process or your system. I think when people use alternative, traditional trial and error approaches to try and understand their process or system, then they're essentially asking stupid questions of their process or system. They're not asking the questions in the most intelligent way, which is design of experiments. So we'll have a few more quotes from different people throughout this segment today. Why did I write this blog series? Well, let me repeat. I think DOE has huge value for scientists and engineers. I hate to see people wasting their time. And I think when people try and solve a lot of science and engineering challenges without using design of experiments, they are wasting their time. A hurdle to people using this method is that it can sometimes seem a bit magical. It can sometimes seem opaque because we use a lot of specific terminology and concepts. So by walking through the case study that we've been talking about, I'm trying to make that more accessible. And so you see that there's really very good, simple reasons why you should be using design of experiments, and that it doesn't have to be difficult, that you can all go and do it yourselves. And what have we talked about through the last 5 segments, the last 5 episodes of this segment? Well, we talked about a specific case study that we're using to illustrate all of this, and this is around optimizing an analytical method to measure water contaminants. And one of the things we need to do to make this work is to optimize the settings of something called a large volume injector. And why this is so useful as a case study is because there are lots of different things that we could change. There's lots of different levers or switches or dials that we can change on this bit of kit that are going to have an impact on how successful we are, on the important outcome. And for us, the important outcome is actually, at the end of it, we get this picture with little peaks, and the peaks represent the impurities in our standard sample of water. And we want those peaks to be as high as possible. And we think that all the things that we can change on the large volume injector might affect that height. So we're looking to understand how each of those affect the height of peaks, and what settings we need to set all these different things to give us the highest possible peaks, which in turn means that we've got the best possible ability to quantify very tiny amounts of organic contaminants in water samples. Now, that's a very specific example. Hopefully, you can all see how the same methodology applies to similar problems across science and engineering. And in fact, it applies in marketing and lots of other disciplines as well. One of the things that we tried to get across was that when you have a lot of factors, a lot of things that you can change in a process or system, when you really think about it, there are an overwhelming number of possibilities. And in this case, we looked at the 8 different things that we can change on the large volume injector and thought about what if we changed each of those so that it was either at the low, medium, or high setting. And we looked at all the combinations across all the factors. And we very simply found that there were more than 4,000 possible combinations when you consider all the different possibilities. And there's no way that we can do all that. We can't test all of those possibilities. What we've been doing throughout this is illustrating that actually, out of those more than 4,000 possibilities, we can take just 26 of them. And these are carefully chosen by the design of experiments methodology, by the software, such that they maximize our information about the process. And we've been looking at why those 26 out of all those 4,000 possibilities, or more than 4,000 possibilities, why they're such good ones to choose. We saw that with these 26 different runs, these 26 different trials of the large volume injector, we're able to start understanding the effect of each of these factors and its effect on peak height, which is on the y-axis here. And we talked about things like main linear effects, the simple linear effect of changing one factor from the lowest setting to the highest setting, and seeing what effect that has on our response. We also talked about how we can model curvilinear relationships between our factor and response, and how we use something called quadratic models to be able to understand that behavior, and how we can visualize all this using things like the prediction profiler in JMP. We talked about clarity and why these 26 possibilities that we tested give us the maximum clarity. They give us the best possible means of identifying the effect of each factor separately from the effect of all the other factors. So we're minimizing ambiguity, maximizing our certainty in the effect of each of these factors, the effect that it has on our important outcome in this case. We've also talked about the fact that in chemistry, biology, physics, engineering situations, the way that these processes or systems behave is rarely simple. Often what we find are that there are some complex behaviors that we need to understand if we're going to be able to optimize our process or system and control it so that we get consistent output. One of the complex behaviors we talked about is this idea of interactions between factors. So the idea that the effect of a factor on the response may well be dependent on another factor. So how we set factor A has an influence on how factor B affects our response. And really, design of experiments is the only way that you can find these important complex behaviors. Now, when you add all that up, so what we've said is that there can be quite a lot of different complex behaviors that we need to understand. And we talked about how we fit models, and we talked back to my experience of my high school physics and Mr. Marcroft, my physics teacher, asking the class, how many points do you need on a graph to fit a straight line? And we talked about the answer that we got from that physics class, and then the reality that actually what you need to fit a model, whether it's just a simple straight line on a y versus x or a curved line, or the more complex models that we're talking about here where we've got multiple x's. Well, the amount of data you need, the number of points you need on your graph, is basically equal to the number of parameters in your model. So when we add up all these main effects and the quadratic effects and all these possible interactions between factors, we actually count them up and we've got 44 different parameters that we need to estimate, and we only have 26 data points, 26 runs in the experiment. So we have more things that we'd like to estimate than we have data. So we say that we're super saturated here, and the analogy that we're using is that this is like inviting 20 people to a meeting room where you can only seat 12 people. And we're going to continue with that analogy and probably stretch it beyond its breaking point when I now go into this demo to look at how we might optimize a meeting using forward stepwise selection. So let's go into a demo in JMP now. So I have 20 people that I might wish to invite to a meeting. These are actually from one of our example data sets in JMP. And I have a meeting room for 12 people. I can only have 12 people in this meeting room. So we need to somehow decide which 12 people we're going to have in this meeting. And actually, if we think beyond that, We might even ask the question, do we even need 12 people? We might be able to fit 12 people in this meeting, but would that be a better meeting than if we had 11 people, 10, 4 people? So this is the kind of question that we want to answer, and I'm going to show you how we might approach that using something called forward stepwise selection, where we're going to answer this question in a series of steps. So in step 1, what we're going to do, we've got this meeting room. We have seats for 12 people, and at the moment we just have one person in there, Katie. So out of all the 20 people that we could have in the meeting room, we just select one of them, and then we see how good the meeting is with that one person. And then we try a different person. We try Louise, and then we try Jane, and we try Jacqueline, and Lily, and so on. We try all these different people that we could possibly have as that single person in that room. And all the while we're doing this, we're tracking how good the meeting is with each of these people. And in this case, let's say we find that actually the first person we tried gave us the best meeting. This person, Katie, whatever this meeting is, they are the best person to have in that meeting. So if we can only have one person, it's going to be Katie. They are the best person for this meeting. Okay, so in the next step, what we do is we say, right, we're going to have Katie in this meeting. What we also want to do is see if we add another person, who should that be? So if we add now one more person and it's Louise, how good is the meeting? Let's try Jane along with Katie. Or let's try Jacqueline, Lily, and so on. Let's try Tim and Katie. And at some point we find that one of these people, if you're going to add another person to the meeting other than Katie, then Robert is the person we should have. And we keep going like this. Step 3, we've decided Katie and Robert are the best 2 people to have. Let's try various different other people, all the other 18 people. Let's try each of those as the 3rd person in the meeting and see how good they are. And we would keep going until we've filled up all 12 seats. So we found the 12 people out of the 20 possible people that give us the best meeting. And we've done this using forward stepwise selection. So that's an analogy based on meeting rooms. Now, the second part of the question that I posed was, okay, first of all, what are the best 12 people that we could have in the room? But then secondly, do we actually need 12 people? So what we would do throughout that forward stepwise process is at each step, we record how good the meeting is. So at step 0, we've got nobody in the meeting. The meeting is terrible. Step 1, we've added Katie, and it's improved. You can see the meeting quality is 50 units of meeting quality, whatever that means. Then in step 2, we added Robert, and it improved slightly, and so on, up until the point where we've added here in step 4, where we've added 4 people. The meeting quality was improving, but beyond that, as we added more people, these are the kind of people that actually, once we've added them, they just spent the whole meeting just tapping on their phones, looking at their Twitter feed or whatever. They're just making the meeting worse. So actually, we've found that there is an optimum number of people to have in the meeting, and these are the optimum people to have in it. And that's a more parsimonious solution. This is what we mean by parsimony. We're starting to explain what we mean by parsimony. Right, so that was a meeting room, and many of us can't even visit meeting rooms at the moment. I'm sure you're all missing them terribly. How does this apply to what we've been talking about? What we want to do here is find the best model in order to understand how to optimize our large volume injector. Well, much like the meeting room, we've got too many things to fit into the model. We've got 44 things to fit into a model on data which is only going to allow us to fit 26 things. So we need to use the same process or a similar process in order to select the parameters that we add to the model, much like we selected people to add to the meeting. So let's go back to JMP and now look at our case study data. Just to remind you, these are our 8 factors, the things that we changed on the large volume injector. And we did 26 runs, 26 different trials with various different settings of each factor. And we ran the same standard water sample through and then recorded how big our peak heights were when we added them all together. And this is a number that we want to maximize. We want the biggest possible peak height. So using forward stepwise selection, we're going to decide out of all those 44 parameters, which are the few that we should add, because we can only add 26 of them. And ideally, we'd actually rather have fewer. We'd rather have a more parsimonious model. That will be simpler to utilize. It will be a simpler interpretation of what's going on with our large volume injector. So here we are at step 0. We've got a measure of quality of the model, which is something called the key information criterion, or rather the corrected key information criterion. And this is a bit like meeting quality, but in this case, actually lower means better. When it gets higher, that's a bad thing. So at step 0, we have a certain AICC, and we have a model with nothing in it other than an intercept. We have an actual versus predicted plot, which looks rubbish. So let's start adding some parameters to our model. So in the first step, we add a parameter. And the parameter that we're adding is, in this case, it's the quadratic effect of injection speed. So if you're only going to add one parameter to a model of how the peak height varies as a function of these factors, that is the single best one that you can add. It has the biggest influence on AICC. It lowers AICC by the most. What JMP has done is it's looked through all the other 43 parameters and decided that they weren't as good. They didn't lower the AICC by as much as the quadratic effect of injection speed did. So hence we've added that. So we'll keep that in our model and then go to the next step where we've added a second term. And that's changed our prediction profile. We've actually got 3 of the factors in here. And that's because the additional parameter that we've added is this interaction between 2 factors, injection volume and injection temperature. So that was the next best thing that we can add to our model. And we can see that actual by predicted is beginning to improve. A perfectly fitting model, all the points would lie on this line. We don't expect it to be a perfect fit. We expect there to be some uncontrolled noise as well. And we progress like this, we'll add another parameter. And in this case, we've added the main linear effect of injection temperature. And so on. And we keep stepping until we've optimized the model. So we've got the lowest possible AICC. We've selected a number of parameters, and we've now selected what we think might be the most useful model. We could continue to explore it and look at what happens if we add more parameters. And what we'll find is it doesn't really improve our fit to the model. It's making the model more complicated, and hence the AICC is increasing. So we can go backwards, and this is what we'd call backward selection if we go in that direction. But now you've seen how we can use a selection method in order to give us the optimum model. This is, by the way, this is the generalized regression platform in JMP Pro, which gives you this very visual way of exploring these model selection methods. So you can actually make some decisions yourself. There's no reason why, just because this one has the lowest AICC, that you have to go with that as the model. You might prefer a model that has more parameters in it. And in fact, these green and amber regions here are giving you an indication of where models are somewhat equivalent, and therefore it's really, there's an element of science and engineering judgment that can also go into selecting the best model there. And that's all enabled through how this is showing you the prediction profiler as well, so you can understand what these different models are doing. Okay, so we've talked about parsimony, how we want to arrive at models that are very simple. The fewest parameters that give us the maximum information about the system. So I want to just recap in the sort of final 5 minutes or so what we've learnt, just the really key take-home points from the whole series that we've gone through here. Well, here's another quote, probably the most famous quote, certainly in applied industrial statistics, from one of the most famous industrial statisticians, George Box. And he said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So any model that we create is an abstraction, so it is always in some sense wrong. What we're trying to do is find the most useful model. And we've seen how one aspect of that is using model selection to find which parameters we should be fitting into a model, we should be adding to a model. More generally, what we've talked about is how models of our process or system are the way to best solve our problems. That is the information that we're trying to arrive at that's going to enable us to optimize a process or system and to control it as well, to understand how we need to control the input factors to ensure consistent output. So this guy's not a statistician. I thought I should probably include an American as well in here. And this guy was the Treasury Secretary 2009 to 2013. And I read a book by him about how they responded to the financial crisis of 2008. And here had some very interesting, very sort of pithy, blunt, to the point ways of talking. And one of his favorite things to say was that hope is not a strategy. So he was talking about how you manage a financial crisis, that you can't just hope, you need to have a plan, you need to have a strategy. And we've seen that through this example, this case study on design of experiments. The number of potential possibilities with these multi-factor systems is overwhelming. So you can't just hope that you're going to find the best one. You need to have a strategy, and design of experiments is your strategy for solving that problem. This guy's also fond of using language that I couldn't possibly repeat on Jump On Air. He was also very fond of saying this, apparently, plan beats no plan. So, they would have these crisis meetings and they'd come up with a plan. And obviously, it's the right thing to do. People would be criticizing that plan, saying, this is what's wrong with that plan. This is what's wrong with that plan. Ultimately, one of the things he was a fan of saying was that plan beats no plan. Whatever we do, we need to have a plan. It's better than having no plan at all. And the same is true with design of experiments. There's no such thing as the right experiment. Whatever designed experiment you do, it's going to be better than no designed experiment at all. So having a plan is going to beat no plan every time with design of experiments as well. So we're running out of time here. What did we not talk about? Well, the example we talked about, this 26-run design of experiments, was something called a definitive screening design. And it was a beautiful solution to this problem. I don't want you to get the impression that it's the solution to every problem. There are other types of experimental design out there. There are other ways of fitting models out there. There's a specific algorithm for fitting a model to a definitive screening design, rather than using this forward stepwise selection that I showed you. Brad Jones, one of the co-discoverers of these designs, wrote a great blog post about when you shouldn't use this wonderful design methodology that he was a big part of discovering. And Brad also, along with Peter Hoos, wrote this book about optimal design of experiments. So when you have a situation that doesn't fit into one of these more standard experimental plans, then what you should be doing is designing the experiment to match your problem, not trying to shoehorn your problem into a standard experimental design. And we call this optimal design of experiments, and it's one of the big, the best tool for doing this is JMP. And this is probably the best book on that for people who are ready to learn about the more advanced topics in design of experiments. So before I hand back to Julian, I just wanted to finish on this. My favorite quote about all of this, I spoke to the application scientist who was actually involved in running this experiment at a company called Anatune, who do method development for different clients, and they also work with them to find the best hardware solutions for analytical chemistry. And John was not a believer in DOE before this. He was not convinced that design of experiments was going to work. He thought this problem, optimizing this large volume injector, was too difficult. There were too many factors. There's no way that some magical statistical approach is going to solve this problem. But he was pleasantly surprised. He was really impressed at the end of it how quickly they got to a solution, how they could optimize this process to give them the best possible, the biggest peak heights, the best method for measuring contaminants in water, and also by how robust this method was. So it didn't just work once. They understood all the most important factors, and they understood how to make it consistent as well. So, what we've done there is, John went from being very skeptical about DOE to being a true believer, and they're using that routinely in the work that they do now. Hopefully, throughout this series, I've gone some way to convincing you as well, if you weren't already, that design of experiments is a very powerful, useful method, that it's not magical, that it's not difficult, and that it's within the power of all of you to try this as well. I'll hand you back to Julian. Thanks.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Phil. I encourage everyone to check out Phil's blog series if you'd like to revisit any of the topics he talked about, or rewatch any of his segments at community.jump.com/jumponair. In our next segment, we have Ryan DeWitt here to take us through and have you tried using JMP projects.
Many of us create multiple windows during an interactive JMP work session, and working in this floating window mode is very common. However, there are situations where having a tabbed interface is preferred. We may also want to associate certain files with an analysis project and not have the full list afforded by the home window. JMP projects provide a single document interface with a tabbed, reconfigurable workspace to bookmark files and easily navigate various open windows like data tables and scripts. A JMP project also launches supporting files like PDFs and PowerPoint documents. Projects can be used to quickly open and close many files associated with one or more individual analysis activities, and can be used to keep parallel projects separate, eliminating the need to run multiple JMP sessions. JMP projects are created from the File menu, then New Project. The creation of a new project will immediately open an unsaved project in which to add JMP windows and files, making it easy to create temporary projects. The project file itself is a standalone file, which points to other items on your hard drive. As a result, this affords the flexibility and organizational discipline of a container-based project, while at the same time keeping the files available to be found on your local drive for other applications. The JMP project interface includes three major sections: the bookmark list, the window list, and the workspace. The bookmark list links to physical files that you want to associate with the project. Basically, this is a curated list from the home window. Bookmarks can be links to individual files, links to folders, and groups, providing local organization specific to files in the project without affecting the folder structure of the files on your local drive. The Windows list is a hierarchical list of open data tables and reports and graphs associated with the data table. And finally, the workspace is a tabbed list of windows, including scripts, graphs, model output, and data tables currently open in memory. The layout can be arranged from a single column of tabs similar to a web browser, or arranged into columns of tab list. The layout is persisted when a project is opened and stored when it is closed. Again, a JMP project can be created from the File menu, then New Project. I hope you found this video useful, and I encourage you to use JMP projects in an upcoming analysis.
Thanks so much, Ryan. You'll see a lot of our speakers here actually on JMP On Air using JMP projects, and they're a great different way to try interacting with your JMP environment. So give them a try. In our next segment, we have Tom Donnelly here as the Dr. DOE to take us through another Dear Dr. DOE, where he talks about how to repair a broken experimental design.
Thank you, Julian. Today I'll be talking about how do you repair a broken experimental design. Let me get my slides advancing here. And so you've just heard Phil Kay talking about design of experiments. And a lot of times when you come into, you're new to DOE, one of the pieces of advice is that you should be as bold as you can with your factor ranges. You want to turn the knobs in the process as far as possible so that you can create big effects relative to the noise. Well, it's possible that if you turn them too far, you can actually break the process. And if you break enough trials, once you've done that, your model won't even be able to run. So what we're focused on today in the Dear Dr. DOE segment here is how do you repair that design using the Augment Design option in the DOE platform. So I'm going to talk again about being timid or bold in your experimentation, and the key points to take away are you want to be as bold as you can without changing that fundamental mechanism for a process. So if you think about if there's water in the process and there's temperature, most people would realize we can't go below 0 Celsius or above 100 Celsius, or else we're going to lose water and we're either going to have ice or steam. Boldness here is also something that we're going to see helps to overcome the need for large sample size. And so using subject matter expertise to set the ranges boldly, I think this goes back also to the quote that Phil had about the more intelligent the question you ask Mother Nature, the more intelligent will be her reply. Well, if you don't know enough about the science, you could ask silly questions with your DOE and you would find that things might not work out so well. If you're still too bold, you can somehow break that design, and that's what we're going to talk about, different types of breaking. And then we're going to drop into JMP and actually show how to create a custom design, make the assumption that certain combinations don't work, and then go back and augment that design with constraints to repair it. And so here are 3 graphs of response Y versus a control factor X. And the red line represents the true relationship between Y and X. And if you're timid in experimenting with the variable X, and that's the graph on the left, remember that whenever you experiment, there's noise in a process. And so the little bell shapes represent that. And sort of a worst case scenario you could get if you only did 2 tests, one at low X and one at high X, is you could get one on the high side of the distribution for the low setting of X, one on the low side of the distribution of Y for the high setting of X, and with just 2 points you get that blue line. So you haven't even captured the right direction of slope of that relationship between Y and X. Notice if we expand that range for X in the middle graph, say that's about 5 times as wide, for the same noise in the process and the same sort of worst case scenario, you at least get the slope of Y versus X correct. And generally in a designed experiment, you have hidden replication. You don't just have one low and one high. You often have, sets of 4, sets of 8 at variables at the low and at the high. And so you're really comparing the means of a bunch of values. And as a result of that, you're very often going to get a good answer, particularly if you're bold. Now, Sometimes you can't be bold, and so the way to fix that is you just take lots of data. You know, clearly on the right, I've got the same range for X, but if I take, say, 20 observations at low X and 20 at high X, the means of those two groups, that difference is going to give us the right relationship between Y and X. So the key here is we don't want to take lots of data. Anytime we can turn the knob far enough and not break the process, we can get a bigger signal relative to the noise. And so boldness will overcome that need for large sample size. So some examples of breaking the process. I'm going to try not to get into too deep with these. These are all things I've run into in either my own career or consulting with people doing design of experiments, but some of them may resonate with you. If you're doing injection molding and you get some of the variables like the viscosity too low by getting the temperature too high and the pressure high, you can get flashing, which is sort of extra plastic around the parts, which makes the dimension measurement pretty tough. I've done thin film work where we were etching away. We're trying to get electrodes left on a display. And guess what? We etched everything away. Well, now there's no thickness to measure. If you're doping your zinc sulfide with manganese, turns out there's only a range in which the physics will create photoluminescence. And so there are some physical boundaries there. Ones that most people can relate to are food. And so I often do for mixture DOE, I talk about making salad dressing, and the liquid part is oil, vinegar, and water. And you'd never mix, you do a designed experiment with 100% of any of those. So you have to constrain the ranges, and even then you could end up with something that maybe tastes a little too oily or too bitter or too salty. I've seen people doing injection molding of dashboards where they're doing polyol and isocyanate. And if they get those two ingredients outside of a range that makes sense, typically 1-to-1, they can get unreacted components and create voids. So the example we're going to work on today is one that's pretty common. Whenever you have time and temperature together, high combinations put in too much energy and low combinations can put in not enough, and you either burn it or you undercook it. So here's some photos from about 25 years ago. I was working with a large pizza company, and here you can see they were studying the effect on cheese color based on time and temperature. And obviously, as we go to the upper right, where we are hotter for longer, we get closer to burning, and we go to the lower left, lower temperature, shorter amount of time, we get closer to not caramelizing the cheese as much as we should. Well, we're going to go much wider than that in this experiment. Say I'm a lot more naive and I want to be bold and I want to study time from 10 to 20 and temperature from 350 to 450. But that previous picture gives you an idea that the upper right corner and the lower left corner are where we might have problems. To make this a little more real, we're going to do a custom DOE because we want to make our design fit the problem. And so we've got also 4 different pizza sizes. The pans are not all uniformly spaced in size. And we're going to look at 3 different types of pizza: cheese, meats, and veggies. And so we naively create this design with JMP's custom design, and we go out, and it turns out that that high combination burns the product, and the low, it's just not cooked well enough, certainly for someone to want to taste it. And I've done this maybe a dozen times, and typically there are 6 to 8 trials that will get lost, and the end result of that is I now don't have enough data to support my original response surface model. So the way we're going to fix this is we're going to take the trials that worked and augment them using the custom design platform, and we're going to add constraints, and the constraints are the blue lines in the graph on the right. We want to avoid the overbaked or burnt region and avoid the underbaked or not done region. And so we need to give JMP that information. So these are all the steps that I'm going to follow here. I'm going to drop out and run JMP. You can either delete or just exclude the broken trials from the data table. We're going to launch the DOE platform, go to Augment Design, choose our X's and Y's, click OK. And then I highly recommend you check the group new runs into a separate block. We generally want to block to see if unknown factors have crept into the process. And blocking is a very inexpensive insurance policy. If there's only one block level, it's adding 1 term to the model. There's really 2 levels, but their difference is that 1 term. The key here we're going to spend a lot of time on is showing how do you get the constraints in. So under defined factor constraints, we'll specify linear constraints in this case. And then this is often going to be based on subject matter expertise or your best guess. In this case, we know which trials worked, we know which trials didn't. We just have to make a choice where we think we won't cause the process to break again. We'll click Augment. We'll choose the total number of trials for the designed repair. Generally is at least 8, but it can be more if you have enough trials fail. And then we'll click the Make Design button. So again, pictorially here, on the left was the original design, and the 6 highlighted rows have been excluded and hidden because those are the trials for which we burnt or undercooked the product and we didn't have a value for Y. We'll then choose the Augment design, populate the X's and the Y. And then in the dialog on the right, the 3 key things to look for are, again, checking group new runs into a separate block, specify the linear constraints, and then we'll hit that Add button twice so we can enter the constraints, where you can currently see a 10, a 1, and a 600, and a 10, a 1, and a 500 in those boxes. And I'm going to explain where do those numbers come from. So again, here's the same dialog box already populated. And so those lines we can get equations for. And notice in the upper right, we're using an inequality statement. We want to stay to the left and below that line. So that's less than or equal to 600. And in the bottom one, we want to stay above it and to the right. So that's the greater than or equal to 500. So again, where do those numbers come from? Let me redraw the graph. The blue shading is the sort of original design region. And what I've done is extend those lines where the process worked back until they hit the y-axis when the time is 0. Okay, and you'll see they're hitting at 500 and 600. And so many of you may remember from high school algebra, but the slope is the rise over the run. And in this case, it actually falls 150 degrees in 15 minutes. So the slope is a -10. The intercept is going to be when b equals y, and that's at when x is equal to 0. And so for the upper line, b is 600, and for the lower line, it's 500. So we just do the algebra, rearrange the equation, and add the inequality for the last step. And now you can see where the 10 and the 1 come from as the multipliers for time and temperature, and the 600 came from that intercept. You can ask JMP to do this. If you just put those 4 data points into a data table and go to the fit Y by X platform, JMP will get you a perfect fit for the line, and then just again do the algebra and you can come up with the settings. And this is something you might want to do, particularly when it's not an easy picture to draw. And my final comment here is I chose those constraints based on the fact that those points along the blue line, I know those work. Here's where I might want to talk to a subject matter expert and propose something less conservative. Maybe the process will work a little bit beyond that. It's only at the very extreme corners that the process breaks down. So you can bring that information in as well. So what we're going to do is drop out and start doing this. Here's where, again, we'll populate the constraints. We'll create the design. You can see that only 18 runs in the final design. There were 24 we started with, and in this case, 6 of them were what we had to exclude. And then when we actually make the new design by augmenting, in this case, I've added those 8 trials at the bottom. And on the right, I'm trying to show this. I think you can definitely see that the, right here, if I sort of draw a line on the lower left, we don't have any points beyond that. And then on the upper right, we don't have any points beyond that. And then I've colored them by the pizza type, and the number indicates are they in block 1 or block 2. If I wrap them by the pizza size, here you can see that where all the points fell. And what I really was trying to see was where did the 2s fall? And so there's a 2 here, here, and here. So there's 3 at the 9 setting. There were 2 at the 12 setting, and then there were 3 more at the 16 setting for size. And the last way I tried to visualize this was to create 3D scatter plots with time, temperature, and pizza size on the axes, and then create them by the type of pizza, which are cheese, veggie, and meats. And then in the bottom of this, I've actually tilted them so we can look directly down on the time and temperature axis to again see, I think the red one's probably the clearest here, but again, that we've cut off that high-high combination and that low-low combination. And you can also see where the block 1 and block 2 trials fall. So with that, I'm going to drop out and do this with JMP. And so here's a data table where I have saved the settings for the factors. So you can see the ranges for time and temperature, the sizes for the pizza, and the 3 different types of pizza. So we go to the DOE platform, custom design. We'll load the factors. So you didn't have to watch me type in all of those settings at the top. At this point, we're not going to use the constraints because we don't know yet where the process breaks. We just want to create a new response surface design. So right now it's got main effects, and so down here there's only a 12-run design. If I click RSM, the model will change from 6 terms to 17 terms. The default trial and JMP is, a default design is 6 more than there are terms in the model, so that's why it's 23. I'm going to change it to 24 just because I have 2 levels, 3 levels, and 4 levels for my factors, and so they'll all divide in evenly, and I should get the same number of cheese as veggie and meat. So we'll click Make Design. And the final design comes back with 24 trials as we requested. And I am just going to make the table. And what I'm going to do is graph this with Graph Builder, where I'm just going to plot the time and the temperature. And I'll get rid of the smoother. And you can see that I have the 4 corners, the 4 edges in the center, but I also got this 1 point sort of down toward the lower left corner. But what we're going to say is that of the 24, this high-high combination, and notice down here that I have selected 3 rows, and then I'm going to hold the control key and select the lower left corner. Now I'm up to have selected 6. Those are the ones that didn't work. As I said, sometimes I get 7 or 8 that have to be excluded. But now I'm selecting those points right from the graph and hitting hide and exclude. And so when I go back to the data table for this, you can see that those 6 rows have been excluded. So what I want to do now is take the 18 that worked and augment that. So I'll go to DOE, Augment Design. Again, I'll tell it these were the factors. This was the response. And as I mentioned in the slides, we'll want to group the new runs into a separate block. And then we'll want to add our constraints. So you have to pick specify linear constraints, and we're going to add 2 of them. And now if you remember, we came up with the 10 times the time plus 1 times the temperature less than or equal to 600 was the upper constraint. And then 10 times the time, 1 times the temperature, 500, and then I have to flip this to be greater than or equal. And those are the 2 constraints that will avoid creating the high-high and low-low combinations that burnt and were underdone. So with that, I can click Augment. And you can see down below here that by default, it's picked 8 more trials than there are runs in the design, and that'll be fine. If I had 8, it would have only said, if I had had only 16 runs, it would have said 24 there. And so it turns out you could cut that down a little bit, but we'll just go with the default setting and click Make Design. Okay, so this is now keeping the original 18 and adding another 8. And we'll just go right to make the table on that. And if I bring this table over, you can see that it has added these 8 rows. And so I'm even going to tell JMP to use 2 as the marker. And invert that selection And we'll use 1 as the marker up here. And that's how I got that in the graphs before. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the option to color or mark by column. And I'm going to pick pizza type. And cheese, I want to make that a yellow. Veggie is fine at green. Meat, I'm going to make that red. So now I'll be able to use that color in the graphs. And you notice the 1s and 2s have changed their colors. So now, if we go to Graph Builder, and again look at things like time and temperature, get rid of the smoother, you can see where everything's falling on each other. If you change the jitter to random uniform, you can see maybe that there's, really 3 things here and maybe 3 there. But the main thing to see is that there are no points down below here. In other words, if I kind of just trace out the design region, it's clear that we've avoided that high and low combination. If I were to wrap this by pizza size, you can also again go in and actually see how many 2s fell in the 9, the 12, the 14, and the 16. And then the other trick that you can do if you don't know this, I think this came in Jump 14, is if you go back to the variables, you could now even change this pizza size to use for marker. And now in the graph, if I were to change this, actually what I should have done is maybe just make 1 more graph. And this time we'll do the time and temperature again, but we'll do it we'll wrap by pizza type, but now you can actually see the size within the individual panel. And the last way that I tried to show this was using that scatter plot 3D, where you take your continuous variables and put them on the Y, and then we're going to create 3 different scatter plot 3Ds based on the type. And I'm going to go right to the red case since that's the easiest one to see. I'll right click, go to settings, maybe make my markers bigger. And you can see where the block 1 and block 2 trials fell. And if I turn this so we look straight down on time and temp, you can again see that we've avoided the high and the low. So with that, I'm going to go back to the slides and just remind you what we talked about here about being bold whenever you can. Just try not to break the process. But if you do break it, don't worry, you can come back and repair that by using the augment design with constraints. And so with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Julian.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tom. I love that message to be bold, but don't worry about breaking too many things. So thanks again for being on the program. In our last segment of the day, we have Eric Russo here to talk us through doing more with structural equation models.
Hello? Can you hear me, Julian?
Yep, just fine.
Okay.
Eric.
All right, cool. So hi, I'm Eric Russo. I'm a statistician. I'm not a statistician. I'm a developer. I'm a developer here at Jump, and it's my pleasure to present to you guys today on Jump Air. I'm mainly going to talk about the structural equation path diagram, which I've been working on for a couple months now. I think it's very exciting. There are a bunch of new features in 15.2 and 16 that I'd like to showcase today. But first, I want to talk a little bit about myself.
And Eric, sorry to interrupt you. You're not sharing your screen in case you thought you were.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll share. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric.
All right. So here's one data set, job satisfaction, which is and we have these scripts here that run the path diagram. So here's one, and we see here that it generated a very cool picture. If you don't know what structural equation models is, I won't attempt to explain it to you because that's not my expertise per se. I'm a computer scientist. But basically, you get these models that you can represent through graphs. And here's an example of one where it's based on collected survey data. Here are all some survey responses, such as support, goals, work, interact. And this model posits a theory of how these variables are related to each other. So the diagram was automatically generated. So if we click reset, then here's a default diagram for this data, but we had specified in the JSL some relationships between the data, so that when we click OK, when we click run rather, let's go back there. When we click run, it'll run the script and generate these relationships, which we can run and come up with numerical estimates for. So this is a very well constructed model that was obviously made by an expert. Probably it was probably taken from a study, which is cool, and all, but it doesn't give us any insight into, let's say you wanted to make your own model, how would you start about doing that? And so, as cool as this is, and I'm sure the model converged successfully, and all the people involved were very pleased with themselves and patted themselves on the back for a job well done. I wanted to walk through creating my own model. I wanted to do an experiment with data that I collected myself, and basically see how the developer of the path diagram would go about, a total novice to SEM, how intuitive it is to build one of these models from scratch. So let's start with that. So I made this data set the other day. So I want to start out with the disclaimer that I'm not a statistician. I took Intro to Stats with R in college, so that's about my only experience in this subject. But I do know how to gather data, and I constructed this data set, which is supposed to be reflective of my mental health under the COVID quarantine. So one of our columns is a number of corona cases positive in North Carolina. Another one is an auto-incrementing number of the days under quarantine. The next is the S&P number, a score from 1 to 5 of a daily satisfaction. I basically ranked myself every day in my journal. The amount of sleep I got that day, the amount of time I spent on my phone, number of emails I received from my boss, the number of build failures and warnings, the number of times I pushed to perforce my code. So let's see how we would model a data set like this that I constructed within the SEM framework. So in order to do that, you go to Analyze, Multivariate Methods, and click Structural Equation Models. And we select the variables that we're interested in modeling. So, okay, so I got and keep in mind that for now, they have to be continuous. Otherwise, the platform will reject them. So I click OK. And it looks like I've passed some things so far, which is good. And we go over a diagram. And here's a default view of the diagram. So right now, this is called the independence model, meaning that there are no relationships between any of the variables. So if we could run this, and it looks like it didn't converge. And it is identical to the independence model because that's what we ran. So click remove there. All right, so let's see how we can get started coming up with some structural equation theories and see how we interact with the path diagram in order to make that happen. Okay, so one of the design philosophies in the path diagram was always to come up with dual ways of doing the same task. So a very common task in doing structural equation models is to create a latent variable, which is kind of the researcher's theory, per se, of explaining the variance between a bunch of observed variables. So let's say that I wanted to lump in the number of coronavirus cases in NC in the days under quarantine. That can be under and maybe even the S&P value, and that can be under anxiety or something, or quarantine. All right, so I'll add a latent variable right here. So this is one of the ways I can create a latent variable, through selecting the variables in the to list and then clicking add latent. Another way for my next latent variable, which I want to put my number of boss emails and build failures and warnings. I want to create in a variable called, maybe I want to call it work stress. So instead of doing it through this interface that I did last time, I'm going to select it through the path diagram and then go through selection and then add latent, which is going to do the equivalent thing, and it borrowed the name from here. Okay, so now I have two latent variables, and lastly, for my last latent variable, I want to lump these guys in and maybe say that they fall under emotional state or mental state. Okay, so as I'm doing this, Dr. Laura Kashishilo, an amazing colleague of mine, is probably very suspicious of my choices of variables, and I've probably committed more than one SEM cardinal sin, but I hope she forgives me for the purposes of this demonstration. So, all right. So now that I've created some latent variables, I want to posit some relationships between them, and the two ways that you can do that within SEM are by adding regressions or covariances. So let's say it's very common that you want to covary two of the observed variables from a latent variable, and that's known as like an error covariance. So if I wanted to do that, the two ways I could do that through the interface are to go to Corona cases and see, and so the relevant variables, you click them in here, and they are selected here, and you click this double-headed arrow thing, which will add a covariance between the two. So that did that right there, and it redrew the diagram. So I added a covariance there. So another thing I might want to do is add a regression. I want to say that my work-related stress is a predictor or regresses on my mental state. So I showed an example there where I used the context click menu to add a regression, but I can also select them in the list, which is what my colleague likes to do, and use add unidirectional arrows, which will create that relationship. So now I'm, and then lastly, let's see, and let's say that my mental state has a direct relationship to the number of pushes I make to perforce into my code. So, and I use the context click menu to create that regression at one time, which is an alternative to going through the list. So the gist is that there are many ways to skin a cat and jump, and here are a handful that I want to show to you. And lastly, let's say that my work-related stress and quarantine are covariate. So, okay. So you notice that as I make changes to the graph, the path diagram is constantly redrawn, which is intentional. We think that it was our choice that as you're building the model in here, we want to present to you the best drawing that we possibly can. And however, if you don't like how something looks, then the user has flexibility in order to reorganize elements in the diagram. One of the principal ways you can do that is through drag and dropping. So let's say I want to position this entire cluster. We refer to it as a latent group in structural equation modeling terminology. We can click select latent group and then drag it to our desired position. So let's say we'd rather it be down here. However, this intersects this variance right here on work-related stress. So I want to position this variance, and I can do that through a rotation. So there are a lot of things you can do like that in the platform. The goal was to make the path diagram as customizable as possible for your needs, and you can also reflect those curves. And you can also, and this button over here, rotate manifest variables, will reorient these manifest variables around the latent variables. So let's say that we want to rotate this variable, this latent variable's manifest variables. We can do that through this button, rotate manifest variables, by clicking on the latent we care about and clicking that button which performed a clockwise rotation of those variables. Okay, and now let's say that I want to make one small change to this. So let's say I wanted to delete this covariance. Or let's say I wanted to delete this regression, this loading. So I can do that through pressing the delete key, which will unfortunately redraw the entire diagram. Let's say I didn't want that to happen. One way you can avoid that is through this lock diagram button in the upper left corner, where if you press it and then you do delete, nothing gets redrawn. So that's what you want to use if you like the state of your diagram and just want to make a small change without going through the automatic redrawing behavior. So Control Z with those changes. So I have my model here, and it looks pretty good so far. I like how it looks, the appearance at least. But let's say that I want to hide something. Let's say that I care about this variance, this covariance, but I don't necessarily want to see it in this view at the moment. The way to do that is you can go through selection and see it selected, and I go to a hide selection. And notice that hid that covariance. It'll still appear in the model when I run it. It still exists, and that's noted by this unhide all indicator at the upper left that just appeared. But it's not visible because in certain cases those variances can get extremely obtrusive and noisy in the diagram. So other neat things you can do is, let's say that we wanted to do something to all of a certain category of element in the diagram. Let's say we wanted to select all the variances. So there are two ways to do that, as usual. You can do select all this type, which is available through the context menu. And now we've selected every single variance in the diagram, and we can make changes to those variances we can press delete and remove them all, for example, and that'll redraw the diagram. Or we could do a selection hide all, hide selection. So those are some ways that you can do very fast operations through the context click that would be hard to do or impossible through the list interface. Another common operation is, let's say we wanted all these variables, all these loadings to be covariate with each other. So one way to do that is by selecting all of them, right-clicking on the loading and selecting Add Covariances. Now we notice that all these loadings covary with each other, which will affect the way that our model is estimated. Okay, and the same goes for regressions. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but you could theoretically do a fully connected regression mapping, but through the same right-click interface, and regress all of these variables on the same variable. And now we get a graph that looks like this. Okay, so with this layout, there are two main layouts. So let's say we want to just come up with just generate the auto layout. We can click reset layout, and that'll just run exactly how the algorithm would render it without any user changes. There are two by default, or there are two possible layouts that are supported in JMP 15.2. There's left to right and top to bottom. And these words basically refer to the directionality of the arrows, which way they point. As we see that there's the direction of the regression specifically. So if I go through layout and top to bottom, instead we get this down here. I guess this is yes. So and we notice that this regression is pointing downwards and this regression is pointing downwards, and that's basically one intuitive way to understand those two layout preferences. In the future, we plan on adding more, but for now, we have left to right and top to bottom. And and keep in mind that any changes you make to this upper model specification area will, when you click run, be perfectly mirrored in the fit model, except now that there are numerics added, and it tells me that I did a really poor job modeling, which doesn't surprise me because I didn't put very much effort into well, yeah, it's for demonstration purposes, obviously. And we can see our parameter estimates over here, which are linked directly into the the diagrams estimates. We can see that they get highlighted when I say they're highlighted. We'll delete this for now. So one thing that you might want to view in your diagram are the means and intercepts. So we have this show tab when you right click on a white space, which affects every possible path or thing that you can hide in the diagram. We could hide the loadings, for example, and now we don't see any of the loadings. This is considered a regression, by the way. So, and I can Control Z undo that. Another thing we can do is show the means and intercepts, which in this one represents the mean of each one of these observed variables data. And that is also, oops, it looks like I selected everything. So, and that's an optional thing that we can, by default, it is hidden, but know that when you estimate it, it is implicitly there unless you decide for it not to be. And we can see that inside the list tab, we have these means intercepts. These represent an edge from the constant to every single observed variable. One thing you might want to do is, let's say I really like this image and I want to share it. You can do that through right-click, copy diagram, going into your favorite graphical editor application and pressing Control V, and we see the diagram has been rendered in Microsoft Paint. So one of the things we're most excited about for the path diagram for Jump 15.2 is this customized diagram feature that's accessible through the right-click menu. So inside customized diagram, we basically get a fully customizable appearances for pretty much whatever you might want to customize within the diagram. So one example where this might be used is we see that these names are too long for these manifest variables. We can't read the entire name. And while in some situations that's desirable, in others, you might want to see the full name. So we can do that through going to the category variable we care about, it's either labeled here, latent and manifest, and going into unchecking use default size, and then adjusting the width so that we can fit the entire name in there, and see that it appears in the preview menu. We click OK, and now we see that quarantine, work, stress, and mental state are all. We can see the full name of all three of these variables. So that's one common case. Also, obviously, you can alter the colors of these variables if you desire to. If you want to have a theme that looks like this, that's perfectly permissible. You can change the path color, the path thickness, the transparency, and I'll show that to you in a second. But here's a customized diagram using this customized diagram tab. You can change the fonts if you would like a different font for your latent variable or your manifest variable or constant. You can do that through here as well. And you can also, anything you can do through the right-click menu, you can you can find in this other settings box, which are a lot of show and hide options, lock diagram, enable grid, for example, is a useful one I use when I'm trying to really precisely place things. And if you're unhappy with it, you can always Control Z undo and get back to where you were when you started. Another place where customized diagram is used is for this fit model. We can see in the path settings, there's different design language for how we represent the transparency, and we can alter that through here. So right here, we see the path transparency is linked to the standardized estimate of a path. So if we show the standardized estimates, right now I think they're understandardized, we can see that the ones that have a larger absolute value are darker, whereas the ones that are missing or very low, relatively low absolute value are more transparent. And we can customize that behavior. Let's say we didn't like that transparency effect. We can set it to fixed. Click OK. And now we no longer are visualizing those strengths in that way. So that's just a couple of things in the path diagram that are new in Jump 15.2. And I'm happy to have shown them to you, and I hope that you enjoy building models like the one I made today, which was probably a very awful model. Thanks. I'm handing it back.
Thanks so much, Eric. That was really interesting. I appreciate that you showed off some of your own quarantine data. I know a lot of us have been collecting our own, so I'm glad you got to share some of yours. And Laura was on the call, so you can answer to her for the model you chose to fit. Thanks again, Eric. Again, you can visit all of our on-demand episodes and watch past segment recordings at community.jump.com/jumponair. Do make sure that you follow us on all of our social media channels. We share often, and we have a lot to share. Share us with your colleagues, jump.com/JOA, for our final episode on Friday. We really hope you join us for the final episode of the season 1 of Jump On Air. But until then, we hope you stay safe. We hope you stay healthy. We hope you're staying close, even as you're keeping your distance. Take care, everyone. Have a good Wednesday.